Welcome to the S&M Podcast with Sean Spencer and Misty Spencer. Real talk with real people, discussing some serious and not so serious hot topics. Let's talk. Hi, everybody. It is S&M Podcast with Misty.
And Sean.
Or Sean and Misty, whatever. It doesn't matter to us. It is episode number 2 of S&M Podcast. I'm so excited. We hope you enjoyed episode 1, and there's going to be other parts to that one and so much more to come. We want to thank everybody for supporting us, and thank you for Love of a Veteran.
Yeah, and absolutely. They have helped change my life and are affecting so many others. And
Yeah.
Number
So
2.
this week we are going to discuss Misty's autism.
Oh.
Yeah. Or I'm an adult with autism or an autistic adult, whatever anybody wants to call it. I wanted to start by saying that we aren't doctors and we don't claim to be. What we talk about is our experience and how we navigate through things as a couple.
I did play doctor.
You did?
Yeah.
When did you play doctor?
Well, didn't everybody play doctor growing up?
No. I don't know. Maybe. I have to ask my sister and brother. Did we play doctors? I don't know.
I think she's missing that point.
Yeah, I am. Uh-oh. Well, there's Misty's autism on full display. I wanted to first start off by saying what I do know about autism is that it does present differently in males and females and differently in everybody. There's nobody that has the same exact neural pathways or same hyperfocus or same delays in development and all of that. Everybody's is different, and you can have other things along with autism like ADHD, sensory processing disorder, and amongst other things. So everyone's different, and I'm going to talk about my journey. Before my diagnosis, which was just some 4 years ago or so, it was pre-COVID, but after my mom had passed. And I really struggled growing up because I always knew that I was different and that my interests weren't the same as others, that I really, really had an aversion to popular things and fashion and all of that. I actually had to take notes for this. I'm so nervous to talk about my autism. This is the first time I've talked about this in any sort of platform. I think the very first time I really talked about it was at the Improv stand-up comedy school on stage. I think that was the very first time.
That's the first time I think I've heard you speak about it outside of these 4 walls.
And like with very close people, but I didn't tell my whole family. I didn't make a big deal of it because I struggled with it so much when it happened. So excuse my nervousness, but growing up, I struggled and I had sensory processing disorder, which I had difficulties with textures and different foods and clothing. And sometimes I would come off as mean. I still do. Condescending. What? Yeah. I actually showed Sean some of the excerpts in my yearbook from 1993, class of 93 in Port St. Lucie High School. And I was reading him some of the messages in there to me. And there was this pattern. People were saying, well, I always thought you were weird, but I thought you were mean when I met you, but
What were the buts?
Usually it was, but you were really nice, but you were really cool. So after they got to know me and my guard came down, because I was very good at masking and camouflaging. So I would roam the halls just trying to find somebody I could mimic. And I was very good at strategic imitation so that I could blend in with my peers at school. And so I never really felt authentic when I showed who I really was. I was made fun of a lot. I was
That's a lot of
bullied.
that's a lot of weight to carry.
It was, and no pun intended, I was also heavy all through middle school, high school. I had yo-yo dieting and I struggled with bulimia, but uh, I struggled so much with the bullying that I just started making fun of myself. So I became somewhat of a muse all through middle school and high school. My nickname was Butterball because I got really burnt on a beach and I looked like a basted, roasted turkey. And I was heavy set
You're so
child.
descriptive.
I am. So that's my autism.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I'm very descriptive. So I had a really tough time growing up and I didn't know why I was different. I didn't understand it. And they knew I was gifted. I tested gifted, but that behaviorally and socially, I would not be able to attend gifted schools back then. So fast forward, I'm an adult. I raise children, have job, all of that, succeeding basically, and married and all of that. My
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
I've been thinking about it since you said it, and I know it's been a while since we've gone past that subject, but it's eating at me, and I think people would want to hear it. I do,
Yeah.
because I don't know the answer. When you said that you started making fun of yourself, kind of bullying yourself,
Mm-hmm.
is that you saying to the bullies, "Fuck off! Nobody's going to hurt me but me,"
Oh
and so
yeah.
that's taking their power away?
Mm-hmm.
Is that how you felt at that time?
I don't know that I had any awareness really of what I was doing. I was a survivor,
Mhm.
and I had
So you,
other
you
abuse in
trained
my
like
life.
one.
Yeah.
You
I did.
trained like a survivor
Yeah. Is that a
without even
joke?
knowing it. Well,
Yeah.
no,
Oh, okay. I
your
didn't know if that
life's
was like a Survivor show. I don't know what. Sometimes he makes jokes and I don't get them. So,
you have to leave the island.
yeah, right. I don't
Yeah.
know what's happening.
No, I guess really what I'm asking is did you feel like you got less bullying when you were making fun of yourself in public?
Um,
Or did they jump on the bandwagon and
I think
did
it allowed them to see me differently. I don't know. It allowed me to make friendships that way. So
mm,
if I were just funny or I could put myself out there first, I would dress weird, wear men's pajamas. And I did that with a friend and I carried like McDonald's Halloween plastic bags. I wore bowling shoes. I did that straight through to college. I always changed who I was. I was never really fashionable. Even if I tried to mimic it, I messed it up. So I just made myself look weirder sometimes,
mhm,
but I really liked looking the way that I did. That's where I don't think it was on purpose that
right.
I did those things.
Mm.
It's just the way I navigated the world. And so I go through college. I never really had a bestie, a best friend. Most of the friends that tried to be a one on one friend had moved on. Even in college, I was part of friendship groups. I'm still friends with some of them today, but I'm a little bit of the outsider.
Yeah.
So let's talk about when you met me and tell them a little bit about what you saw from when you met me to now.
Wow, that's a loaded statement. So yeah, I knew of Misty for a while without meeting her. Um, we roamed in some of the same circles, but for some reason, really never met. at least not,
Formally.
one-on-one. Yeah, formally.
Mm.
Um, we were talked about by our friends and of our mutual friends. So there was awareness, and I think we met for the very first time through an introduction by one of our friends,
Mm.
uh, and that was the first formal introduction. It was at a club, and I was so over my head in how I felt meeting you that I couldn't put two words together to save my life, and it came
No, he
across
actually went like literally like, "Hey," and turned around and walked away. I was, what happened? I just said hello.
right. Yeah, it wasn't you. It was definitely me. I wasn't expecting that response from myself. Because it's like that proverbial movie when they say something stupid to the girl and they turn around and start walking away and start verbally beating themselves up.
Hmm.
Yeah, that was me.
And I already thought he was kind of a jerk. No, let's be honest. I really thought he was a jerk. My parents had seen him sing. I'd gone out to the clubs, would watch him sing, and he was so guarded when he would come down. And I study human behavior. I have to navigate the world because I'm autistic. And so I study human behavior so intensely. And I would see Sean come down from singing, and I'm like, ugh, no thanks. I thought he was
What
actually
was
kind
the
of, well, I thought you were
Did
kind
you
of
see
a,
that?
yes.
That face?
I was like, he's kind of a dick, it's the truth. He knows this. This is not the first time he heard it. But once I saw the real you after that, hey, and we became friends.
Mhm.
How did that look for you? Did you see my autism at all?
I don't think I did. I think my endorphins were so pumped up. I was blinded by, everything.
Hmm.
So I honestly don't think that I recognized anything and attributed it to autism until you had been diagnosed.
Hmm.
So then I could look back and remember certain experiences, certain conversations,
Hmm.
and go, now I understand.
Yeah. When I
Because it's
was diagnosed,
subtle. It's
oh, it
not it's
is.
it's not it's not like you walk down the street with a limp. I mean,
No.
you can physically see that. And most people only hear 33% of what you say anyway.
Hmm.
So when you're speaking, most of the time they're not going to hear anything
Hmm.
that leads them to believe. So there's nothing there. So it really is a more subtle uh, happening or happenings,
Hmm.
and it really didn't make sense until you were diagnosed. For me,
Yes.
anyway. I just
And
thought you were nuts. No, I'm
it's
just
true.
kidding.
Everybody does. I
Just
was the
kidding.
crazy aunt. Everybody thinks I'm weird. Let my freak flag fly. I mean, literally everybody in my life has told me I'm weird. So as an adult, I could mask that. I could, like you said, they were subtle. You didn't really know, because what does autism look like?
Right.
And so when I started melting down, or he saw little things, I had an obsession with even numbers. I counted all the time. He saw when I would get angry if he changed those things. I'm very rigid, and yet I'm very free. Just so many parts of me that's very attractive to people. However, the other side of that, when I'm socially exhausted from decoding people, now I'm really good at it. I do it for a living. But back then, it was a struggle for me to decode, and you would see me exhaust
Right.
and melt down. And then as I got older, it got harder and harder to find out why this was happening to me. Why
Mm-hmm.
why do I keep melting down like I'm a child? I'm not a child, and I'm smart, and I'm rational. And then I couldn't control myself. And I call that other side the phoenix.
Right.
And I needed to figure out why this was happening. And that's when autism the diagnosis, sensory processing disorder, and all of that. So I came to Sean. And
Well,
yes.
how did you, when you got the diagnosis, can you share what that felt like for you? Did you have an idea through your own, studies in college, uh, degree in psychology, worked with autistic children,
Mhm.
all of that combined? Uh, did you have an idea that maybe it was, somewhere on a spectrum, or not at
No.
all?
Mm-mm.
So it was a complete shock.
An utter shock.
Okay.
And I wasn't a behavioral therapist yet.
Oh, that's right.
I had chosen to be a
Oh, yeah.
behavioral therapist after that, but I did have experience with young people that were autistic. Um, and I never really thought about adults with
Mhm.
autism. It just wasn't anything that I studied because I always studied children. And so when one doctor tells me and then a second one, I didn't believe it. I was
Mhm.
like, this is ridiculous. Then the third round of testing, um, I was like, okay, I have to accept this. So I cried, I grieved, my meltdowns were worse. I didn't know how to tell you. I thought everyone's going to think I'm attention seeking because I had just gotten a degree in psychology, and all of that flooded me, self-doubt, and people not taking me seriously because nobody took me seriously. So
Yeah. So how did you navigate that, and how long did it take before the tables turned and people started going, oh, actually, she does know what she's talking about?
I started living authentically. It took me several years to work through that process. I worked with my own life coach, I worked with my own psychologist, and was in crisis. I was in severe crisis, especially through COVID. COVID was, as much as I loved it and I loved the time and I loved being at home and all of that,
Right.
it also broke me down.
Well, too
And
much of anything is not good.
yes, and it really came to the forefront because I wasn't coping well and we were fighting constantly. But I think a lot of people through COVID were fighting constantly.
Statistically, you are correct.
And that's what I was kind of like attributing it to. But then I read this amazing book called The 22 Things Your Aspie Girl Wants You to Know. Back when I was diagnosed, Asperger's was still the
A term
thing.
that was used. Yeah.
And I know that that is dissipated, but I was diagnosed Asperger's. So I read this book called The 22 Things Your Aspie Girl Wants You to Know. And literally, thing after thing. And what I did was learn how to articulate my autism. I learned how to tell you I'm not communicating well. I'm melting down. I started learning how to tell others and then also living authentically. I started not worrying about if people thought I was weird. I started finding my own fashion.
How did you prepare for that? Because I mean, literally, you just turn on the TV and the whole world is worried about what other people are thinking of them, thinking of what they're wearing, thinking of their makeup, thinking of their hairstyle, thinking of their shoes, their purses, their suits. I mean, literally, that's what society breeds for humanity. How did you, in a society so wound up about how other people view and think of them, how did you accomplish that? How did
Uh,
you prepare? Or did you?
I didn't because I never really cared what people thought. I'm fairly indifferent, you know that.
Mm-hmm.
I could go one way or another on most things, and then these other things I'm just horribly rigid about. That's why I confuse people so much because I'm very analytical, but I'm very whimsical. I just have so many different parts of me.
I've
So
met them all.
yes, you have. I said it on the last episode, and this is the truth. I learned this in comedy school when I was doing comedy writing. The Breakfast Club lives up here.
Mm.
So I just decided to let the Breakfast Club out. And if I felt like dressing very masculine with a flannel and boots, like bender, that's what I was going to wear.
Sure.
And if I wanted to be feminine and princess like and be like Claire, that's who I was going to be that day. And I stopped worrying about who I was trying to be.
Right.
And you know, I'm extraordinarily moody. Everything I do is based on my mood, and I'm able to channel that. I'm a grown up. I can uh, block out certain things and hyper focus on work or hyper focus on a task or project. But I didn't have to work hard. I just had to not care that I didn't fit in anymore. And I had a husband, Sean. I had a husband that really loved all these little parts of me. As I started showing more and more of my craziness or how eccentric I was, because I'm very eccentric in areas of my life.
I think that, as I mentioned on our first and last podcast, previous podcast, I think when you're trying to heal certain parts of you, you have to look at literally what you're doing to yourself and your body, what you're putting into it. And even if you're working on, like me, depression, anxiety, things like alcohol, they really don't help. Now, I liked alcohol. I really did. I love the taste. I love trying new things. But, as you age, it catches up to you in terms of weight and, body damage and things like that. And I didn't want all that to happen at such a young age.
I did do that. I made choices after my diagnosis. I made choices that I was going to change what I was doing to my body that was causing my autism or my challenges to be heightened. I worked really hard at figuring out what would work for my body. And one thing that did not work was alcohol. And we're going to do a whole episode on the changes that we've made and how we've navigated that separately and as a couple. But it really did make a difference. I'm glad that you went in that direction a little bit, because when I stopped drinking, I really, really could start seeing my truth and live authentically and not allow myself to shut down or use alcohol as a means to escape from the social anxiety.
Right. And just to be clear to the audience, that doesn't mean having a drink or two, on the weekends is going to
or do whatever works for you.
Do whatever works for you. But
we don't care.
But in terms of having a condition where alcohol can really negatively affect that condition,
you can look at that.
You have to make your own choices based on where you can, like you said, be authentic.
Yeah.
Still be authentic and still enjoy your drink.
Yeah, my mimicking would go off the chart. I mirror people. And so my mirroring and all of that, my behavior really resembled who I was with. And so if they were wild and crazy and loud, I would also get wild and crazy and loud. If they were sad and shut down, I would mimic that behavior. So all of my masking, all of my camouflaging would get worse, which would make me more exhausted, which would make me go even more haywire.
Right.
So working through all of that, I now, for the very first time, other than at comedy school, I am saying out loud, I'm out. I am, I know, I'm an autistic, well, I've been out for a long time. I am.
By the way, that's another podcast.
That's a whole nother, that's a different podcast.
That's S&M After Dark.
After Dark, yes, which will be around our anniversary time. We're looking at June for dropping that. Yeah. But for right now, I want to bring us back around and say that this was the hardest thing for me to do. I hope that I was able to convey a little bit about what an autistic adult looks like and help people understand. We're going to talk about it more, especially as we get more feedback and we're doing interviews. But I wanted to say that if it's something that is prevalent in your life, if you are struggling certain areas, look at that. Look at different things that could be influencing that. Once I figured this out, this key, it literally unlocked the whole world for me. And I've never been more happy or lived more authentically. I found my purpose.
And I can validate that.
Yeah, I'm doing everything I want to do in my life, and I didn't think that I could. And because of you and your support, because of the children's support with all of this, I've really been able to do what I want to do and soar. And so I wanted to thank you for enduring this journey with me.
Well, it wasn't with, out my own issues to deal with. That's for sure.
Fair.
However, I will say that since your diagnosis, the reading that I've done, the reflecting on our past, really makes sense. And it is, and understanding that has helped me gain more patience and ask questions. And I really am proud of you for all the hard work that you've put in. Self-help is the hardest help, but it is the most rewarding help as well. And so I know I'm super proud of you. I know the kids are amazingly proud of you.
Thank you. Thank you. So with that, Sean Spencer, what are we doing next week?
Well, Misty Spencer, next week. Next week.
Ding, ding,
we are going to talk about.
Come on.
Yeah, last week was depression.
Yes. What are we doing next week?
Something a little more upbeat.
He is surprising me right now. I don't know what he's doing. Make a decision. We're going to lose them. They're going to hang up.
No, you don't want to miss this.
Come on.
We're going to talk about abandonment.
Ooh, I love abandonment. It's my favorite. All right.
And what that does to somebody, especially when they're young.
And when you have abandonment issues as an adult and all of that. Oh, I love this. I can't wait to dive deep into abandonment. I love human behavior. It's what I do. And I love talking about it. I love talking the truth. So please subscribe to our channel, share our podcast with everybody, help us spread our message. If there's feedback to help us make it better, please send it. We already started the soundproofing. We took that feedback.
Yeah, a little podcast evolution never hurt.
Yes. So we are listening. We're listening to your feedback. Help us make it better. And with that, I say we'll see you next week. Yeah. On Friday. February 17th.
Yeah.
Doing the math.
Grab your bucket of popcorn. It's going to be a ride.
We're doing abandonment. Woot, woot, woot. All right. High five, Mr. Spencer.
Podcast number 2.
We appreciate you guys. See you.
Take care.